All right. Well, Carrie, thank you for joining us today. I remember we had you here a little while back for a different topic. So I have to tell you, I heard your name and I'm like, I know that name. And I saw you at the presentation you did in McHenry for the foreign trade zones. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I recognize her. But so it's good to have you back. And thank you for joining us and telling us a little bit about foreign trade zones. So with that, please expand upon that introduction. Tell us who you are, why you're here, what your qualifications are, and then dive in.
Sure, yeah. So glad to meet everyone. I'm Carrie Zethmyr. I'm the administrator of the foreign trade zone for the Rockford market, which includes all of McHenry County. So even though it says Rockford's FTZ, McHenry County is actually probably one of our more active markets, and we'll get into that in a bit, and I'll share some of the background on who in McHenry County uses it. But also I work for Newmark Real Estate Company. So Newmark Commercial Real Estate on their consulting team. So I am a licensed broker, but I don't participate in like the transaction side of the business. But on behalf of Newmark, we do site selection consulting and location advisory for commercial clients. So like in addition to doing this foreign trade zone work, I guess I also relate to you guys on the real estate side. Our clients at Newmark are typically probably like 80 to 60 to 80% industrial. And so we do some headquarters and also some kind of back office is generally kind of what our distribution is. Personally, I spend a lot of time in sites. I'm in the site selection industry, so we do the location advisory for clients on where they should set up businesses, usually like a multi-market analysis across the United States and the globe. I've done field work in Malaysia and Thailand and India for US clients looking to set up operations overseas. So we have a really diverse kind of project base and most recently have been involved in site identification for very kind of heavy industrial applications. So I spent a lot of time looking at greenfield sites, understanding the infrastructure for those sites and the ability to support highly scalable industrial projects. So just kind of, I wear a few different hats, but I've been involved in foreign trade zone administration since 2012. So I've got a long background of being involved in international trade. Before joining the private sector, I actually worked in regional economic development for the Rockford Area Economic Development Council is where I started my career. So that's that region's equivalent of like McHenry County Economic Development Corporation. So I worked for that organization, but for Rockford. And then I also, after that, I worked for the state of Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So I was a region representative for DCEO. I'm not sure who your region representative is now, but basically what I was doing was managing incentive programs for companies as they were growing and expanding in Illinois. And McHenry County was part of my jurisdiction when I worked for the state of Illinois. So overall, it's 17 years of experience in helping companies grow and expand, helping them find places to grow their facilities, tools like foreign trade zone or economic incentive programs that they can use to set up operations. And so it's a career that I've enjoyed, and I'm glad to continue to partner with opportunities in McHenry County. So at a high level, like what the Foreign Trade Zone program allows us to do is take a company's building, like their footprint, their warehouse, their factory, and remove it from US Customs territory. So now that company's inventory or manufacturing processes are now taking place outside of US Customs territory. And they're able to then import foreign product directly into their facility, deferring the customs entry process. And so this is relevant for companies that operate global supply chains. And if tariffs are a big part of their costing model, if tariffs are having an impact on their cash, because they're paying a lot out the door right now in tariffs, if it's cutting into their operating capital. Generally, if companies are operating a global supply chain right now, they're trying to figure out what is their tariff strategy because of our high tariff environment. And so the foreign trade zone is not a panacea. It's not something that's going to be like a loophole that's going to make them not have to pay tariffs, right? But it is a tool that gives them a sense of control. It allows them to become their own customs compliance officer, in effect, in-house, and control when they pay the tariff. And so it's a cash management tool. And it will allow them to also potentially have some cost savings on fees related to importing. And also, in some cases, they can eliminate tariffs on product that they re-export outside of US customs territory. So, like conceptually, if you think of a foreign trade zone as kind of like a temporary landing pad in the United States, where you can bring in foreign product and hold it and then choose as a company, like when that product is going to be sold to the US market and when that tariff is going to be due. Um, so this is just kind of a graphic demonstration of that. Um, So like conceptually, like this, you see here I have an image of like your hypothetical foreign trade zone for a company. Could be a factory, it could be a warehouse, but it is a physical space. So again, like when we're talking about the foreign trade zone, we're talking about a company's building. We're not talking about some, gated, fenced area at the Rockford Airport. We're talking about the actual physical real estate of your clients in McHenry County or wherever they are in Illinois. And so in this conceptual example, if a company is not in a foreign trade zone or is not activated as a foreign trade zone, they're paying a bulk, like lump sum tariff payment at the Port of LA in this example. So with tariff rates as high as they are, let's say it's 25% used to be a high tariff rate. It's not necessarily a high tariff rate anymore. So like let's just say you import $1 million worth of inventory that has a 40% tariff at the Port of LA. If you're not in a foreign trade zone, you're paying $400,000 in cash right up as that product comes into the US market. Also, the product is going to sit there for 3 to 5 days because it's going through a customs clearance process. Now, in this example, if that company is a foreign trade zone, the product, that $1 million of inventory, is able to bypass customs clearance at the Port of LA and be transported inbound directly to their foreign trade zone. And they've deferred the customs clearance process. And so they're holding on to that $400,000 in cash. And that, cash right now is so critical to companies. I'd say like right now, we're seeing longer, terms and, payment terms getting extended. Cash, just because there's so much cash being eaten up by these tariffs, it's having an impact on operating capital. So holding on to that $400,000 in tariffs could be used for making payroll, for just other investments, other expenses that a company has. So that cash flow impact can be really huge for companies right now. So again, in this hypothetical example, you've imported the foreign inventory into the foreign trade zone, and now you are ready to sell maybe half of it. Let's say 50%, $500,000 of that inventory you're going to sell to um, a customer in Wisconsin, and then another half, like 50% of that, you're selling to like a customer. I can't see what I have here as the example in Europe. So in that hypothetical situation, you're going to pay the tariff on the product that's sold to your customer in Wisconsin here, but you're only going to pay it like as that product leaves the facility. So it might not be a single lump sum. It could be incremental payments over a period of 12 months, depending on how much you sell at that time. So it gives the company an opportunity to better hang on to that cash, manage when they pay it in smaller increments. Also, in this hypothetical example, let's say 50% of that you're selling to customers in Europe. In that situation, that product is never entering US customs territory, so that tariff is never due. So if they're selling half of that $1 million that they imported and re-exporting it to Europe, they've just eliminated $200,000 in tariff payment because that product is never being sold to the US market. So you can think of the foreign trade zone as like a temporary landing pad. Um, but since it's never, so instead of paying the tariff on what you import when you import it, you're paying the tariff on what you sell to the US market when you sell it. And because a lot of these companies also are passing on this tariff cost to their customers, they can better time the payment of the tariff to when are going to collect the revenue from their customers to cover the cost of the tariff. So it frees the company up from being like, lending cash to their customers who are ultimately going to pay the tariff anyway. So so I just want to pause and see if there are any questions on that because like that's just kind of the basics at a high level of like what a foreign trade zone is and like conceptually how it works. But it's hard sometimes when talking about foreign trade zones to not get really into kind of some granular technical discussions quickly. And so I just want to, kind of pause and make sure that the basic, or, that concept makes sense.
Bruce?
So is every industrial building in McHenry County under the umbrella of the foreign trade zone and eligible for this treatment if a prospective buyer or tenant moves into it?
Yes. So McHenry County is part of our service area. And so they're going to have to go through an additional process to be approved and activated as a foreign trade zone, but they are eligible for that. Yes. Holistically, anywhere in McHenry County, we can get it activated as a foreign trade zone.
And who do they apply to for that designation?
So let me just move ahead to, okay, so this is a map of the 176 service area. And actually, okay, so oops, let me see if I can actually make this picture bigger. We're gonna just, there we go, make sure McHenry County is fully included in that image. Okay, so there are currently, okay, so see how, so this is the service area of FTZ 176. So the yellow parts of McHenry County, and I'm just gonna, oops, I can't move those. Sorry. So the yellow parts are in the 176 service area. So that's basically, that's the foreign trade zone I represent. And so they would initially make application through me and the Rockford Airport if it's in this yellow. You can see there's this little chunk down here that's gray. And so it's basically like east of and I can set a thumbnail so you can see it more accurately, but like Crystal Lake, I think, and just like Huntley is largely in it, but if you get, I don't know what road this is. But this little section of McHenry County, that's part of foreign trade zone number 22. That's the Chicago's port district. So this gray section, they're eligible to be a foreign trade zone, but they have to make application through Chicago. And I've had conversations with companies in that area that don't want to go through Chicago. And it is possible for us to activate them through Rockford. but the application process, because we have to do kind of some special application with the National Foreign Trade Zones Board, is a little bit longer and a little more expensive for national fees. But there have been companies that have been wanting to pay that because they don't want to, and I'm not, I pride, our foreign trade zone on being very customer service oriented, very responsive, very consultative, very, just helpful. And I think, there's other foreign trade zones that are a little bit more bureaucratic or just kind of administrative in how they function. And so sometimes people want to work with Rockford instead of Chicago. And we're glad to engage in that conversation. But to directly answer your question, all of McHenry County can be covered can become a foreign trade zone. This little section should start with Chicago. Everything in yellow, which is most of McHenry County, they make their first application through me and the Rockford Foreign Trade Zone.
So what is that dotted line that runs through Dixon,
Yeah.
up around DeKalb? Yeah.
So that is the port of entry boundary. And that is just for reference, everything that's in the foreign trades in 176, our service area can include everything that is 60 minutes or 90 miles outside of this part of entry boundary. So that's how we decide we get down to Streeter or these areas, unless it's in another foreign trade zone. So that's why, like Batavia, like theoretically, because that's an FTZ 22 service area, it's like off limits for me to go like proactively, you know, try to find FTZs there. This little section down here in gray by Putnam County, that's part of Peoria's foreign trade zone. But so the blue dotted line is a little bit distracting because it's just kind of a reference point of how the exterior boundary was determined.
Okay.
But everything in yellow is within our service area.
So I noticed on this map that JA Freight is not listed. Is that because they are a warehouse versus?
No, so they are still in the process of activating.
Oh, okay.
I know that they are working on getting their paperwork to customs still for a full
Okay.
activation. Yeah, we're currently activating um two, we're currently in the process of activating 4 new foreign trade zones. 2 of them are in McHenry County. One of them is J Logistics operation in McHenry. And it takes the process to become activated, it's driven, the timeline is really driven by the company's development of procedures to become an activated foreign trade zone site because you have to, and I'll kind of go ahead a little bit. Okay, so there's 3 different entities that have jurisdiction over foreign trade zone. First is the local grantee, and so that's where you start. And then you make application to the National Foreign Trade Zones Board, which is a part of the Department of Commerce. And this is actually a very easy process. So it's really more just administrative and they're typically pretty fast in their turnaround. But the critical path is really developing your procedures, your operating procedures, because the company is not in U.S. Customs territory, they are subject to search by Customs and Border Protection. They have to have security procedures. They have to have cameras. They have to, you know, have different like specific software that allows them to report their customs entries to customs. There's a lot involved. It's not just a matter of, just getting a piece of paper and then on you go there. And so it can take companies time to invest in developing those procedures and then formally applying with Customs and Border Protection. So companies sometimes move very fast and sometimes it takes some time to develop those procedures and organize internally around the actual creation of a foreign trade zone. So
Another
I
question.
expect, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there. We talked about JA Freight. I'm very confused as to how a freight company who makes nothing, and I don't know how they would be subject to tariffs since they make nothing, or why they would benefit from being in the foreign trade zone.
So it's a service that they'll offer their customers because there's a couple companies like Capital Warehousing is one, JA Freight is another, and then we have another 3PL warehouse that is, you said, it's not their inventory, it's their customers' inventory. So they're extending the benefit of the foreign trade zone to their customers. So that opens up opportunity for companies like manufacturers or that don't want to invest in their own foreign trade zone. They can effectively outsource the inventory management of their imported good to a capital warehousing, to a JA Freight, and benefit from the foreign trade zone program without developing their own FTZ. So yeah, it's a service then that JA Freight is going to offer to its customers.
Well, additionally, some of those manufacturers may not have the space to dedicate a separate area in their own local warehouse for the foreign trade zone. So they would keep their materials that they need for production on site and use these warehouses for storage of product coming into the country. So bad example, but Terracotta Industries, who they've got their own space, but if they wanted to bring in steel, have JA Freight or Capital Warehousing hold this inventory for them in this secure location. It was all fenced off. I've been inside JA Freight one, fenced off, gated. I mean, minimal access allowed. I mean, it's secure. And then, as in my example, TC Industries needs that steel, then they could bring it from the port within JA Freight over to their warehouse locally, and that's when they would pay the tariff. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so now the issue is that, so one thing I'll say is you can commingle FTZ and non-FTZ inventory. So because you can commingle FTZ and non-FTZ inventory, like the one thing I'll say is companies don't necessarily have to section off a separate section as foreign trade zone. Some companies choose to do that because it's just easier for them to like have that visual separation, have that separate inventory tracking. Even like caging isn't required, but some companies again choose to invest in that level of security just for their own internal operations. So it's the but yes, like in effect, if you're going to outsource any of your warehousing in, or just have that supplementary warehousing, putting it somewhere that they can store it as foreign trade zone outside of US customs territory, especially, if companies right now are afraid that the tariffs are going to go up, maybe they want to overbuy so that they're able to bring it in at a current tariff rate, and store it in a foreign trade zone, hold it there, but defer that tariff payment and just take out inventory one by one, therefore just pay the tariff as they use the product, not as a bulk lump sum payment.
But it would
Does
be
that
true
answer
that
your
a JA
question?
Freight company like them, they don't pay any tariffs. They're not paying the tariffs. It's their customers who are still paying the tariffs. Is that correct?
Correct.
They're just
So they're
providing
extending
a
that benefit
service.
to their customers. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so we're excited about the growth of the program. We'll have our first foreign trade zone down in Putnam County, or is it this county here? Is going to be is activating soon. So we're interested in having more geographic diversification, just touching more parts of our service area. Should be another one in McHenry County that's in the process of activating is Medela, the breast pump manufacturer. So that'll be exciting as well. They have a large international supply chain, so it really makes sense for their business model. And so I think right now, just because of the high tariff rates and the impact it's having on cash flow, companies that historically, like maybe it made sense, but the investment in a foreign trade zone was too high. They were kind of delaying becoming a foreign trade zone. All of a sudden now they're like, okay, we need to get this in place and are investing in those procedures.
Great. I have a question. Dan from First Mid Bank. So this is more, I don't know if it's not gonna be real estate, anything real estate related, but you're talking about the commingled collateral. So for us in banking, we have lines of credit that are supported by inventory and accounts receivable. And so on the books, when do you recognize the inventory? Because you said commingling, so does that, if it's sitting in the foreign trade zone for them, is that still on their inventory? Actively, right? Or is it is it still separated? When do they recognize inventory on the books?
I don't want to answer that question if I don't know for certain. So, just not being an accountant, like, and knowing how that the kind of the detail of that. I guess yeah, and I don't want something like coming in collateral. I mean, when you say collateral, I mean the inventory, the physical inventory can be in the same warehouse, but how they look at it from an accounting perspective, I mean, I could say a guess, but I don't know if that's helpful to say a guess.
I could see the different companies doing it different ways.
Well, I see it, yes, I would see it as recognizing you're not paying the tariff, so you really haven't recognized the inventory. When you pay the tariff, I'd say that's when you recognize.
But you paid for the product.
Right, so it's a gray area.
Right.
So, but for us, that triggered a thing in my brain where it's like, oh, that'd be a good understanding of where we would stand on that as a bank. And
So
how we're
Carrie-
gonna recognize it.
Carrie, have you talked with Scott Forge or maybe Fabrique? Do you know? I'm curious why they don't. It seems, and I don't know a lot about their business, but like Scott
Right.
Forge, I would assume they bring in millions of dollars worth of steel or whatever they bring it in.
Right. I know I'm years and it's been a long time since I've talked to Fabrique. It's been a long time since I've talked to them. If I recall, and Scott Forge, I don't think I've talked to. So I don't, I can't speculate in terms of why they don't do it.
Okay.
Yeah, but right now steel and aluminum has such a high tariff rate that
I guess the larger question is, why wouldn't a company utilize this service, if you will, this program?
right. So I would say some of the like hesitation, a lot of companies they might buy from like US distributors. So they might buy from like there's TriStar Metals is a distributor of metal. And so TriStar Metals is importing that foreign inventory and holding it and then selling it to maybe a Scott Forge or a Fabrique. And so TriStar Metals should be the foreign trade zone. And because their whole business is managing this inventory. And so but Scott Forge may be seeing it as like a domestic purchase, even though the inventory was originally imported.
Gotcha.
So I think it could make sense, especially if you did like a zone to zone transfer, because if say TriStar Metals and Scott Forge were both foreign trade zones, you could do a zone to zone transfer and further delay and defer that tariff payment. And the more zone to zone transfers you do, the like compound benefit of that deferral is, right? So overall, I can say, the feedback, the reason why the reason I give you the reason companies give me and the reason I think that is behind it. The reason companies give me is they say, a lot of times they say, well, we don't import that much. So, a Scott Forge might say, I don't import that much, but it is coming from imported from their distributors just importing it. But they only see that or only they infer that it's that domestic purchase and it's too much effort to compile it further upstream. So sometimes they don't import much, or sometimes they say, well, I'm going to pay it anyway. So if I have enough inventory turns, if I have a high volume of inventory turns, then my deferral benefit is less, right? Because if I'm turning that inventory, which I'm hoping to do, right? I want to turn inventory. I don't want to sit on a bunch of inventory. Then that deferral benefit gets lessened. And so, they may they may look at it from the perspective of, if I'm not going to sit in my inventory, I'm going to pay the tariff anyway. It's not worth all of this investment.
All right.
So, because it is an investment to become a foreign trade zone, I think my opinion, is that companies have a lot on their plate right now. Like, so many of these manufacturers or these companies, they're responding to what's in front of them today. And that's paying their employees, that's responding to their customers, it's putting out fires in their office. And a foreign trade zone takes a concerted effort and investment to activate and operate. You're kind of upgrading your level of compliance and collaboration with Customs and Border Protection beyond what it ever has been. So, unless a company is kind of forced to do that because it just makes too much sense, and we're seeing that more and more right now because of the high tariff environment, it just becomes an item on a list to look at and deal with someday. And they don't want to deal with it. So they'll find any reason they can to be like, oh, this doesn't make sense. It's too much work. It's too much investment. I'm going to pay the tariff anyway. So I'm just going to put it at the bottom of my list. And maybe I'll look at it again in 2 years. So
Or maybe they'll utilize J Freight or Capital Warehousing. So yeah, those are good options.
right, exactly. And that certainly, for opens up a lot of options for smaller businesses that don't have the the wherewithal to invest in a program like this. Yeah, or they
We have
could,
about
like
5
Scott
minutes
Forge
left.
could
I wanna-
outsource their management of their high value inventory to a JA Freight. And I can't speak on behalf of, those companies and what they'd be willing to do, but, I think it's a huge business opportunity for a JA Freight to, or anybody to be like, oh, you want me to come in and manage your foreign trade zone warehouse or pick a building, like any building, and I'll just come in and make it a foreign trade zone and manage it for you. I don't
Oh,
know.
well.
Seems like a good business idea to me. But
We've got about 5 minutes left. I'm not sure if you have more slides to go through.
sure. Let's see. So I'm really proud of our website right now. I've done a lot of investment in the website over the last year to make it very user friendly and to make it have a lot of resources on it, including an interactive foreign trade zone benefits calculator. So there's this like embedded Excel spreadsheet, and you can download it as well to play with it on your, as your own Excel spreadsheet. But what you can do is with any company, kind of play around with it by importing certain values. These values are in yellow. Those are the inputs. And then it kind of spits out like, what are your estimated annual savings from re-exports? Duty deferral, estimated first year savings. So, you can calculate the duty deferral by looking at the annual inventory volume, like how much they import, weighted average duty rate, what's times your cost of cash. So we look at it from a cash perspective for that deferral. Like if I'm, 6% of, $500,000, if $500,000 is your duty payment, and then like divided by your inventory turns, that's how we can actually calculate the value of a duty deferral. And then you can also save on customs brokerage fees because companies are effectively becoming their own customs broker and clearing that through customs, and they consolidate it into a weekly entry. So if there's a high volume of imports, they're consolidating those fees, they're consolidating merchandise processing fees. If they're scrapping or destroying some of their inventory in the facility, then they cannot pay the tariff on product that's scrapped and destroyed on site. So this calculator is just a way to kind of conceptualize for a company, what's your year one savings ongoing. And when you look at it, it's like a lot of times year one savings could be like, it's not rare to see it in high six figures, mid to high six figures. And you're like, well, what's the investment in a foreign trade zone? Well, it's certainly not that much, right? So like from just a financial, like, like feasibility, like return on investment, it's very easy to demonstrate, but it's just still so hard to like raise it as a priority when companies just have so much that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Um, there are costs. This is again all on our website. So again, there are costs. There's applications to the grantee, the Rockford Airport, one time. So we have this, there's one-time costs, there's annual fixed costs, there's variable costs. It says TBD because a lot of it depends on like, is it how a company structures its own, what service providers they use. They typically have to work, with a consultant to help them develop their operating procedures. It is an investment. Looking at different prominent types of users, you see a lot in automotive, aerospace, consumer goods. Like for these consumer goods, a lot of these companies are just managing their inventory, their foreign inventory, like Crate and Barrel. They have I love going to the Crate and Barrel outlet mall on Route 59 in Naperville. So that is attached to a Crate and Barrel warehouse. And that Crate and Barrel warehouse is a foreign trade zone where they are just bringing in all of their inventory for the US and then, and then waiting until they sell it to the, are ready to go to a retail store in order to sell it. Watches like Fossil, they're just high value goods, right? And so they're just holding that all in a foreign trade zone. But are there any other questions? I'm glad to just kind of address any kind of final lingering questions anybody has.
Yeah, I had a question. So what is the impact with all the changes in federal government? Are they gonna collapse down on these trade zones because it's, and get the tax money? I mean, have you seen that anywhere where the federal government in the current position is looking to to get more tariff and by not having these? Does that make sense?
So yeah, so there's different levers that the federal government can pull to restrict foreign trade zone benefits. Basically, the one lever is whether or not they're requiring imports to come in. Now, I'm gonna answer your question in a very technical way. So I apologize because we're at time. So, but you asked a very technical question. So I'll try to keep it very simple. So the benefit that they have restricted is this inverted tariff. So the inverted tariff we haven't talked about, but this is because it's no longer relevant because the federal government has required product to come in under privileged foreign instead of non-privileged foreign status. So historically, companies have been able to manufacture in their zone and take imported product that's dutiable and convert the product through substantial transformation into a product that had a lesser duty and then sell the product with a lesser duty to the US market. So like tractors, heavy equipment has been a very common use of the foreign trade zone because heavy equipment historically, like tractors, has had a 0% tariff. So companies like John Deere, Caterpillar, Mitsubishi Logisnext in Marengo have been able to take all this imported product and then manufacture it into a non-dutiable product and sell a non-dutiable product to the US market by manufacturing in their zone and taking advantage of this inverted tariff benefit. That benefit is no longer possible because the federal government is requiring that product come in under privileged foreign status, which locks in the tariff rate. So tariff rates can no longer be converted. So now the only way to benefit from the foreign trade or reduce your tariff or eliminate your tariff is through shipping it back out of the country. So sales to the US market have now required that the original tariff rate follow the life of that imported product. That's really the only lever that they have to pull any remaining lever would be to just eliminate the program altogether. So, that hasn't
Great, thank
been
you.
a conversation that I'm aware of. Anyway,
Thanks, Carrie.
yeah,
Do you have a slide on the end maybe with your contact info? Or beginning or?
yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, with that, I don't see other questions. I'm going to close, stop the recording at least.